Well, good to see you. I'm here today with Garen Staglin, founder of a wonderful winery called Staglin
Staglin Family Vineyard, yes, Jim.
in Napa Valley. Just a short time ago, you started, I think, about 37 years ago.
37 years ago, or overnight success.
And you have a daughter who's now president of the vineyard, right?
Shannon, lovely Shannon, yes. And we have two grandchildren who are now on their fourth harvest that they can remember, Cicely and Arthur. So we got Gen 3 on the way here.
Well, that's important, especially if you're going to be called Family Vineyard.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Gary, you've had an unbelievable career in the winery business, one of the people who really put Napa on the map. And the fact that it's a family business really comes through in all the things you do brand-wise. But what we'd like to talk to you about today is your passion beyond the business and passion beyond the hospitality world you created there in Napa, and talk to you about why mental health has become such an important mission in your life and the things you're doing to combat the problems related to mental health, particularly in the workplace. How did this come about as a passion of yours?
Well, Jim, we have an incredible son named Brandon. And Brandon was this incredibly high-achieving kid who, even at age 11 or 12, was talking to me about interstellar space travel using fusion technology. Big dreamer. But unfortunately, like many kids, at the age of 19, he had a psychotic break. Knowing what we know now, we could have seen that coming based on his sleeplessness, his social withdrawal, his easily agitated behaviors. But this was in 1990, so it's a long time ago. Technology and science has advanced, so I'll come back to that later. But I was in YPO at the time, and because we had the resources to find and get an accurate diagnosis, who would have thought that knowing your son had schizophrenia was good news? It was good news just because we knew what the problem was. Yep. So now we could do something about it. So we got him on a system of care, and he was able to go back to Dartmouth College, and he ended up graduating on time with honors in a dual major.
That's terrific.
And it was he wasn't well, but he was functional. He didn't have the fraternity, big time social life, but he got through it. And it was at that moment we said, we have two choices. We can run away from this problem, or we can run towards it. Mm-hmm. We chose the latter. And for the last 29 years, we've been working to try to help not happen to other families what happened to us and with Brandon. Uh-huh. And we've devoted ourselves to accelerating science. We're a 501c3, which means it's a nonprofit, not a foundation. Mm-hmm. Then to translate that science into services, and then to impact society. And across those three pillars, we've actually raised $560 million so far.
Wow.
And we are happy about our progress, but in no way complacent.
And the progress, what I really applaud that you're doing, Garen, is systematizing how people can understand the problem.
Yes.
Detect the problem,
right.
Have remediation, but more importantly, create a culture, particularly in workplaces,
right.
where people understand that this is an issue that we can talk about, yes. That we can do something about, and that we can create an environment that's beneficial to people with all different kinds of neuro abilities.
It's Jim, the thing that we find it easy for people to understand it. We say brain health is a spectrum, and we're all on it. And COVID and climate change and all these things has sort of decreased our level of brain fitness. Mm-hmm. So we're all operating at a slightly different place. But with that spectrum understanding, we don't have to marginalize those people that are in a more chronic set of conditions. But we also say that everybody has somebody. Mm-hmm. We've too long had the belief that mental illness was either something we could do nothing about because the brain's such a complicated organ, or we as a person didn't do enough for our loved one, family member.
Or ourselves.
And therefore, with those two factors, let's just not talk about it, right? Yeah. And that whole thing comes into this ugly word, which is stigma, which if you have the illness, transcends itself into discrimination. Yes. Because you're afraid to tell anybody you have it, and because you're going to get marginalized. So we said there's what's the best way for us to address that? And we said, look, we spend 80% of our waking hours at work. Now it's 100% for most people because work and home are the same thing, right? But by working through employers, that's the best place where we can change culture. So modeling after the CEO Roundtable on Cancer, which Bush 41 created, yes. And if you think about 30 years ago, cancer was the C word. People didn't want to talk about that either. So over a persistent methodology and led by CEOs, the culture in workplaces was changed. Changed how? First, there was parity as it relates to care. Yes. There was parity as it relates to time off for appointments or work. And there was parity as it relates to people feeling like you weren't marginalized because you had cancer. And in fact, it was exactly the opposite. Today, people find that out. First thing is a hug. It's what can I do to help you? And they tell you about their sister.
It's not a death sentence anymore.
It's not a death sentence anymore. So we said we have to do the same thing for brain health and mental health. But rather than in this toxic political environment try to get one president or another to do that, we said the best way to do it is build it as a coalition of CEOs. And because I'm on the board of Silicon Valley Bank and I've worked in private equity, I did Safe Flight Auto Glass with Teddy Forsman. I did Solera with the Golder Toma guys. I've built up a Rolodex of connections of people of power, and that has allowed us to sort of build this one organization at a time with some incredible leaders like Brian Monahan at Bank of America, Tim Armour at the Capital Group, David Long at Liberty Mutual. We now have 170 employers who are
part of this coalition.
Part of this coalition with almost 8 million employees globally and 20+ million dependents. So we're already impacting 30 million lives with a culture in which there is no discrimination, of which it's okay not to be okay. Yep. It's just okay not to do it. And by doing this as a nonprofit, as opposed to a consultancy service of high dollars, we charge virtually nothing because we want this to grow faster, and we build on the success of others. So we are trying to let people learn from others' mistakes, avoid tuition fees, and go faster. And it's working really well.
What I like especially about what you're doing, Garen, is giving us who run companies a way to measure how our environments are in terms of
yes.
being good places that foster and encourage good mental awareness and health. And you give us tools.
Right.
So tell us what we're doing on May 1st.
So on May 1st, we are actually going to launch globally the Workplace Mental Health Index. I think, Jim, you and I talked about this before. If you can't measure it, you won't know where you are, and it's without that metric.
Because if you ask it, I think we're doing well, but I have no way of knowing.
You have no way of knowing. So with Columbia University and Ethisphere and the significant funding of several of our members, we have built a self-assessment tool across 10 major factors so that you as the CEO of 1-800-Flowers and others in their similar capacity can measure where you are on a maturity scale of 1 to 5 on these 10 factors. And the purpose of that is, first of all, to give you a benchmark of where you are, show you that benchmark against what we think is the right metric for best practice in each one of those 10 factors. And then, more importantly, help you find those 2 areas of priority where you should devote your time this year. Because you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. You've got plenty of other priorities. And we will help you with existing publications and tools, and/or we'll connect you to other members who have already developed that set of best practices. Sure. So it's about going faster, focusing, and then now you've got a new benchmark for next year. And now we move forward from there. The first set of these of our existing members that have done this,
about 40 or so?
40 of the 170 have taken it so far. And it's been very interesting to see. One of the factors is provision of services. People do really well on that because they have an EIP program. Yeah. Where they do really poor is psychological safety. Where they do really poor is communication. Mm-hmm. Where they do really poor is frontline supervisor training. Mm-hmm. So it is So the average score right now is about 2.5
On a scale of 5.
on a scale of 5 across the aggregate of all these factors.
And these are companies that, what would you say, what would they have told you pre-index
They would
that
say,
where they were on a
"We
scale
got
of 1 to
this.
5?
We got this, right?
Yeah, we're 5s.
We're 5s, right? Well, yeah, it's interesting who I'd ask. If you ask the C-suite, they're saying 5. If you ask the frontline employees, they're going to give you a 2 or a 1.5, right? So there's a big disconnect. This brings us together.
Giving people tools to measure, and then tools to remediate.
Remediate, to point yourself to prioritize, and we can show you where you are relative to others in your industry, or where you are relative to your own geography. You happen to have geographic concentration. Several of our companies are global members, so they're doing one for Asia, one for the US, and one for EMEA. Some are just in one of those localities. And some have very different businesses. One company is in healthcare, but also has a veterinary practice. So they're searching that one versus the other, because there are cultural differences. But we're quite excited about this, and the momentum and the energy is, as you've said, I think you have to have a big ambition. And our big ambition with this is that we want to make neurodiversity the 4th pillar of DEI. DEI gets us into the boardroom.
Yes.
If we get in the boardroom, now we can really make progress, because all the boards that you've sit on, and this is where ESG and corporate responsibility are now getting real traction. Yeah. If we can make neurodiversity alongside of racial, gender, and sexual orientation, that 4th pillar, and make this index the metric by which companies report, we will accelerate our progress.
So 5 years from now, when we gather and we're sipping a good glass of Cabernet from Staglin Vineyards.
Yes, I hope that's going to happen.
What's on your list of things that you've accomplished in this next 5 years?
We will have made that happen. We will have 100 million employees covered by the One Mind at Work Charter and Coalition. We will have a culture, broadly speaking, where everyone speaks openly about their own mental health and that of their family members, and are not afraid to tell you that I had a family member that died by suicide. People don't commit suicide, they die by suicide. And that we will have reduced that rate of suicide because people don't feel the shame and blame. They don't self-medicate, which is a downward spiral of health. And that we live in a world where healthy brains for all is a vision that is much closer to reality.
Well, we're rooting for you. We hope that dream comes true, and we'll do everything we can to help you to get there.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much.